Now, we have learned, first of all, that there is this God and that it's ever available right where we are in any circumstances. Don't forget, it's just as available when we're going through the fire, when we're going through the floods, when we're going through the hurricanes, when we're going through the valley of the shadow of death. It's just as available. Don't turn your back on it because you're in a problem. That's the time to reach out harder than ever. And we've learned that it is God that worketh in you. And so when the going gets very tough, that's the time to relax, not the time to tighten up. That's not the time to get fearful. That's not the time to get tensed and strained. That's the time to relax and realize I don't have to do this. It is God that worketh in me. It is not the whirlwind. It's not the hurricane, the storm that reflects God. It's the still small voice. It is the gentle Christ. And so we come to that final word. From Genesis to Revelation, we have God and the presence of God and the might of God and the power of God and the strength of God. But as we come toward the end of the Bible, from the New Testament on, from Matthew on, we begin to learn a new word. And that word is the Christ. I can do all things through Christ. I live, yet not I, Christ liveth in me. And there we come to a word that defies definition or analysis or interpretation even. It's a word that you have to take, or a term that you have to take just as it is, without any explanations, without any appeal to the reasoning mind to understand it. For the more you try to understand it, the less you'll have of it. The more you can accept the term the Christ without question, without any desire to analyze it or understand it, the more of it you will have. The more you try to mentally probe, the less you will have. Scripture tells us that there are 4 temporal kingdoms, using metals as a base, but we know that it means the forms of matter. And that these 4 temporal kingdoms will be destroyed. And then it tells us that they will be destroyed by a rock that is carved out of the side of a mountain without hands. That's pretty nearly as ridiculous as you can get. A rock carved out of the side of a mountain without hands will fall on the 4 temporal kingdoms and crush them. Well, you see, even though you could not analyze such a statement or humanly reason it out, still you can spiritually discern that there is that which is invisible and infinite, which takes from all material form its power, so that in our consciousness we understand that the power is not in the form, but in the invisible creator of the form. Now that statement doesn't mean that the world is going to do away with gold or silver or brass or atomic energy. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that the Christ is going to take the destructive element out of the forces of this world and govern them. That's what it means. Now, you have already seen that done, for instance, in the case of electricity, where the mind of man governs electricity and its uses and its activities, harnesses it for man's purpose. The mind does that. In the same way, right now you are witnessing that atomic force is being harnessed, and someday will be harnessed not to destroy man, but to serve man. And so the destructive force will be out of atomic energy, and atomic energy will be a gentle little lamb governed by the mind of man. The mind of man. That very rock on which our life is based, the mind, which has no material form, and yet it's the source of our intelligence, or the seat of it, or the avenue of it. That mind will harness every bit of this atomic power, and eventually atomic power will be just as gentle a lamb as electricity is when it's properly hooked up. And they will be servants of man, not destructive elements, but constructive elements, servants of the mind of man. And so it will be that one of these days you will find that every form of matter, take gold, which today dominates and rules man. It buys men's souls. Isn't a day of the week when men and women aren't selling their souls for gold or the equivalent of it? It's gold or its equivalent, money, that governments are using in this attempt to destroy each other or conquer each other. Money, which is in that sense a devil, will someday become just a pliant little thing in our fingers that we ourselves will use and have complete dominion over. And it'll never be able to buy us or bribe us, but we'll be able to use it, not to hold on to, but to transfer and use for our purpose. Gold will be tamed so that one of these days it will be nothing more or less than an instrument for our use, just like streetcar transfers that we don't hold to have any value, bus transfers that we don't use to have any value. So it'll be with dollar bills or pound bills. They will no longer be powers. The power of the Christ will crush all power out of money as a force, and it will become just a tool, just a servant that we can mold to our use. And so you're going to find one day that all forms of matter are literally going to be under our feet. Germs, we'll have absolutely no fear of them at all. No fear of them at all. We will have conquered them. I'm thinking right now of an illustration where for many, many years the Eskimo of Alaska was subject to tuberculosis, and to such a terrible extent that the medical facilities of Alaska were inadequate to care for it. And a law was passed permitting these Eskimo to be brought down to the States for treatment. And you know, within just 3 years, in 3 years' time, tuberculosis had been so conquered that they had been able to disband this sanatorium and give it up and have no further need for it. And the very little remaining tuberculosis that there is in Alaska is so little that the local authorities can handle it and take care of it. Those germs have become subdued. They're no longer the master of the Eskimo. They are the servants. They no longer master them. So it's going to be with all forms of disease. The disease will not master us, neither will the calendar. The calendar is one of the worst enemies of mankind there is. Because every time you tear off a page, it's like tearing up part of your life. There goes yesterday, and fewer tomorrows. But that won't always be. That won't always be. A calendar will someday be man's friend. And he will be in such complete control over time and the passing of time, the time will have no effect on his mind or body whatsoever. And then instead of man dying out with either disease or age, when his time comes to go into a higher experience, he will make the transition the same as a child goes into the adolescent period. And the adolescent goes into the maturity period. And then we go into the middle maturity period. So we will just keep on making transitions from one stage to another. But that won't be while the calendar has power over us, or while germs have power over us, or while money has power over us, or while bullets have power over us, or bombs. It will be when we have dominion over the 4 temporal kingdoms. When we, through the Christ, through the gentle Spirit, the still small voice, will be able to say, thus far and no farther. Thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from the Father. Now you can begin to demonstrate that any day of your life that you wish. You can't prove it to its fullness because that comes with time and maturity and experience. But you can begin as of this very moment. And just remember that within you there is this gentle Christ, which may be called the still small voice or the voice of the Lord. And that as you develop the capacity to hear it, to listen to it, that it becomes dominion over everything on this earth, above the earth or beneath the earth. The dominion that was given to us in the beginning when we were the image and likeness of God. Unto man was given dominion over these 4 temporal kingdoms. Everything in the earth, everything in the sky, everything in the waters beneath the earth, and everything in between, man was given God-given dominion over. And the means of that dominion was the voice of the Lord. The voice of the Lord came to Adam and Eve. The voice of the Lord came to Moses, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. The voice of the Lord gave Moses dominion over those horrible experiences in Egypt. The voice of the Lord gave Jesus dominion over food, over health, over death itself. The voice of the Lord does all of these things. There's a psalm, you can look it up in your concordance, I've forgotten which number it is, but there is a psalm that is devoted almost entirely to the voice of the Lord and what the voice of the Lord does. And you'll be surprised what the voice of the Lord does. And in it you'll find also, he uttered his voice, the earth melted. That's the 4 temporal kingdoms. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. All problems disappeared. All dominion over us was met, and we were given dominion over these things. And so you see, when people say that they haven't time for it, Don't believe it any more than when they say they can't afford this or that. It's just a matter of what you wish to use your time for or what you wish to use your money for. We can afford anything and everything that we truly wish. And we can find time for everything for that we really wish to find it for. There was a period in my life when I was preparing for this work, not knowing that I was being prepared for it, but I was being prepared for it, when I could go through 12 solid years with an average of no more than 3.5 hours sleep out of every 24. For 12 solid years, and I required no more sleep than that. And the reason was that I had to have all of those hours in use. In those 12 years, I read the 1,500 books that have become part of my consciousness. In those years, I read some of those books through 100 times from cover to cover. I really read, and all the time worked 12 hours a day as a practitioner doing the healing work, and then for part of that time even went to the university to learn Sanskrit. So you see, there is time, because there are 24 hours in every day. But how much do we wish to use it? If we wanted to use 20 hours out of 24, I can assure you that the grace of God would sustain us. Because it isn't sleep we need, it isn't bed we need, it's the grace of God we need. In the same way, we could get along on half the amount of food we consume, because the grace of God would make up for the difference. We merely eat as much as we do because it's available and because it's tasty, not because it's necessary. We can do with half if we have to, and be just as healthy, if not healthier. For the grace of God has to be called upon when there's less of material reliance. Just as those, as you already know, who have come to science and been told that they had to throw away their medicines, they got along without them. I know that the rest of the world wouldn't believe if it knew how many people there are who go 10, 15, and 20 years without a drop of medicine, without an aspirin, without a cathartic. The world would never believe such a thing, because its physical setup is such that it must have aspirin, it must have cathartics, it must have this, and it must have that, as a minimum. And just think of all of us that you know about that have gone 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years either with none or with so little that it's almost negligible. And then you'll know that it is possible to do away with that medicine cabinet, because the grace of God supplants it. I know sometimes there are some doctors who smirk about the subject of Christian Science or spiritual healing and like to tell about how they have a patient who's a Christian Scientist that sneaks to their office or had to have an operation, or maybe they have 2 patients. But they forget about how the tens of thousands of those who don't, or that maybe even that one had to succumb once in a lifetime, that they don't stop to remember, that even though a Christian Scientist or a New Thoughtist or a Unity student or an Infinite Way student may once in a while have to resort, through fear or family, to material remedy, compare it with the rest of the world and see how wonderfully the grace of God cares for us in place of material remedies. And then you'll know what I mean when I speak of the Christ. The Christ, that gentle presence which is the grace of God in our experience, how it carries us through, and how, when we learn to listen to it, hear it, and obey it, it finally gives us dominion over disease, over germs, over unemployment, over unhappy human relationships, gives us dominion. And then you'll understand why the day will come when that rock carved out of the side of a mountain without hands, that gentle Christ, that Spirit of God within your consciousness, will someday give you dominion over every element of human life, including time, age, death itself. You will have dominion. And so should the time come when you want to pass out of this plane of existence, you will. But not through being pushed out with some horrible disease, but just by gently easing yourself out and into whatever experience lies before you, because there is an experience that lies ahead of all of us. It is not going to be given to anybody on the face of the earth to stay in this plane of life forever. If there was such a thing, I'm sure that some of our ancient Hebrew and Christian and Oriental mystics would have done it, because they lived their lives in full conformity to the will of God. Men like Jesus, men like John, men like Paul, men like Moses, men like Enoch, Isaiah, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Shankara. Those men lived in accord with the laws of God. And if it had been meant for anybody to stay on this globe forever, they would have remained right here in physical form, but they have all walked out of this form into whatever experience was ahead. And so will we when our appointed time comes, and it will be a way of transition, a transition into a higher plane of consciousness, one in which we will be freed of all the human ties and human responsibilities and human obligations. While we're here, we can't shirk those, but the day will come when we'll be released from them into the ability to walk our own way in the footsteps of God. And we'll do this, remember, through that thing called the Christ, or the Spirit of God in man, or the gentle presence, or the still small voice. Call it whatever you will. It is within you. It is available to you through an inner hearing. It is available to you through an inner seeing, not the hearing of the outer ear, not the seeing of the eye, but through an inner seeing and an inner hearing and an inner feeling, that presence becomes alive. Now, you may have to have 4 periods a day, and then 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 eventually. They may be 1 minute in length, and some of them may be 3, and some may be 10 minutes. Occasionally you may find one to last an entire hour, in which you will sit in stillness and in quietness. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. The assurance that David had, the assurance when he said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." That's the assurance that comes in stillness, in quietness, in peace, in tranquility. You develop that. The reason is you have become separated from it by your centuries of human living. You have become separated from it through the belief that you had to earn a living by the sweat of your brow or keep a household with your physical strength. And now you're paying the penalty in a sense of separation from the still small voice that is always within you, ready, able, and willing to speak, to lead, to direct. And now you have to go back. You have to retrace your footsteps to the Father's house. And I can tell you how. Through the many, many periods a day in which you determine to take mastership of your clock and not let your clock tell you that you haven't time, but you tell the clock that you have 24 hours of time and loads of minutes in that 24 hours. Count them up, 24 times 60, and see how many you've really got there to set aside your period, even if it were 10 minutes before the rest of your household were awake, if it were 5 minutes after the menfolk left the house, if it were 5 minutes before sitting down to that lunch or that dinner, if it were 10 minutes before retiring, if it were just a few minutes waking in the middle of the night, you would soon find that you are developing a capacity to be still, to be quiet, to be listening. Nobody can tell you whether it will take you 1 week to receive the first intimation that something has happened, or whether it might not be, like in my case, it took 8 months. 8 months of more than a dozen periods set aside every day for meditation, and still it took 8 months before I had the first response. But then I had the second one a week later. And I had the third one probably 2 weeks later. And then a fourth one 1 week later. And then gradually 2 in 1 week. And then eventually 1 every day. And so on until now. Most of the time it is possible for me to sit as you see me here, get quiet for a minute, and then all of a sudden have it come. And quickly. And quickly. And give me my message, or give me my word, or give me my Bible passage. Don't be surprised if I tell you that it was riding in the taxi between the hotel and here that these 3 Bible passages were given me that I read tonight. While we were riding in the taxi, I had this Bible in my hand, and I kept fidgeting with it, and that's when it came. And then as I've sat here and turned within quietly every once in a while, the message kept coming and coming and coming. It isn't made-up message. It's not memorized. It keeps coming in the degree that we turn in. Oh, sometimes I have a little struggle because in my work, we're all day long and sometimes all night long. I'm dealing with the problems of students and patients, and some of them are pretty nasty problems. Sometimes you get pulled down off your high estate, then you have to build yourself back up again. Sometimes people come into your experience who really pull almost everything out of you that you've got of a spiritual nature. That's all right. You can rebuild it again. And if it blesses them, you don't mind it. But it does give you something to meet, because you have to build back up again to where you were. The Master did by going away for 40 days. We ought to go away much more than we do for this rebuilding. Now, the whole of it in the Master's teaching is the Christ. He called it the Father within, but Paul called it the Christ. And the Father within, or the Christ, that's the voice. And that voice, the Word of God, is quick and sharp and powerful. And when that voice utters itself, the earth melteth. The whole 4 temporal kingdoms of the earth melt. I have seen all forms of sin and all forms of disease melt away when that voice spoke within. I've seen all kinds of human wrongs made right when that voice spoke within. I've seen such power in our union relationships in the States, company and union. I've seen such things as you cannot imagine. Just by that same voice that gave me these Bible passages for this lesson tonight. That same voice. It's the voice of God, and we call it the Christ. It's the gentle presence. It's the calm. It's the inner assurance or tranquility. It's the grace of God. Call it any of these names. But be sure of this, that until you have it, you are nothing. You are just aging human beings. You are just nothing. Branches cut off from the tree that withereth. You are nothing until you have a contact within yourself. When you have, you've made contact with living waters, the streams of life that renew and renew and renew, just like they renew your plants year by year, year by year. Water does it. Only this is a living water. that is within us, and it is that which gives us command over the 4 temporal kingdoms. It won't allow money to be our masters. It lets us be masters over money so that we can command whatever of it is necessary for our legitimate needs. It won't allow the body to master us forever. The Christ enables us to master not only our bodies, but as in the experience of Jesus and our practitioners, even to govern the harmony of the bodies of those who come to us for help. It won't allow us to be made victims of the blitz, as I brought out to you the other night. But you can walk the streets in the midst of the blitz, and it will not come nigh your dwelling place, if you're abiding in the secret place of the Most High, if you are maintaining your contact with the inner being, the Christ, the Spirit of God in you. If you ignore it, if you refuse to make your contact with it, if you don't have the stamina to stick with it until it does take over your life, you just have to do it in the next life. Someday or other, you can be assured of this, that every knee is going to bend. Every head is going to bow to God. So if you put it off in this lifetime, don't think you can put it off in the next or the next or the next. Someday, you're going to have to look a clock straight in the eye and say, you've got 24 hours of 60 minutes each, and brother, I'm going to use you. You are not going to use me. I am going to use you. And then it is that you'll find those 5 and 10 minute periods when you can seat yourself and say, speak, Lord. Thy servant heareth. My fate is not out there in the whirlwind, in the fire, in destruction. My fate is in the still small voice within me. And when he uttereth his voice in me, the earth of problems just melts away. And I'm going to learn to be still. And I'm going to learn to listen. I'm going to develop the knack. I know you might tell me in a year or two that you haven't done it yet, some of you. And all I'm going to answer is, what difference does it make? You still have another year or 2 or 3 or 5. We don't have to be in as much of a hurry as we think. It isn't the youth who have done all the great things in life, you know. It's some of those who didn't attain until they were far up above the status of youth. Jesus did his mighty works in his youth and passed out of this plane of existence when he was 33. Already had completed his work on earth. Well, in 1875, when the first edition of Science and Health was published, Mrs. Eddy was 55 years of age. And she completed her work at 90. When The Infinite Way was published, I was 55 years of age. So you see, everything isn't done by youth. Lots of things have been left for us. So there's no hurry. No hurry. If you can't learn to meditate properly this year, keep at it. Next year and the year after, you'll get it. And when you do, remember this, that you will have overcome the 4 temporal kingdoms in some degree. No longer will this world have entire mastery over you. You will have begun to have mastery over many things of this world. Little things to begin with, greater as time goes on. And always remember, we've had great composers at 80, great inventors at 80, great artists at 80. Time means nothing, years mean nothing, longevity really means nothing. There's no particular credit in living to 90 or 100. Lots of people have done their work at 30 or 40. Some of the greatest mystical poets passed on before they were 40, 35. Longevity isn't everything. The developing of our maturity is, and if we attain our maturity at 30, that's fine, but if we don't attain it till we're 60, that's good too. And if we come into the fullness of it 70 or 80, that's good too, because we have forever. Nobody is ever going to become extinct. Always remember that. There is no such thing as extinction. Passing on is not extinction. Passing on is merely going from one mode, one state of consciousness of life to another. So there's no extinction. And the degree of your spiritual development when you pass on determines where you begin on the other end. Just the same as where you were spiritually when you came into this plane determines where you are now. And if you're not further along than you ought to be, it's because in your last life you hadn't made the most of your opportunities and gone far enough spiritually. So it is. The further we go spiritually on this plane, the further we find ourselves spiritually advanced on the next. And we keep on that way until the day comes when we come into the fullness of our spiritual vision and never have to be reborn again. That is where it is said in Scripture that there is neither birth nor death. That is in that ultimate consciousness when we have attained full dominion over the four temporal kingdoms and all matter is our servant and has in no wise any power or jurisdiction over us. Then there is neither birth nor death. So it is. How are we coming along here? Let us shut it off for a little bit, huh? Now you will understand when you read the Infinite Way writings why they are built completely on Bible texts. The Bible has the Word of life. Now the Bible and the truths of the Bible won't do anything for you in a book. They won't do anything for you even after they're moved over into my books. These Bible texts only begin to work for you after you've moved them out of the books into your consciousness. Whether you move them direct from the Bible or whether you move them from my writings with the explanations around them makes no difference. But don't believe for a minute that the Bible as a book can help you or my writings. It is only as you lift them out of the book into your consciousness, dwell on them, ponder them, as if they were seeds that you were planting in your mind, and then letting them take root, then letting them grow, as you water them and fertilize them each day by renewing them, pondering them, thinking upon them. There you have the way toward the life of dominion. Now, I have a book in preparation which I'm sure will not be off the press this year. We have so many other things that have to be done before that can be properly edited. It's all written, but it has to be edited. And it's rather shocking in nature because it explains some of Genesis and how it is that we have become human beings merely by accepting the belief of good and evil. Well, you spoke before of fear. But see, if there was neither good nor evil, there'd be nothing to fear. You'd recognize that nothing in this world had power, since all power was in God. And then you'd be right back in the Garden of Eden. before the fall. The only reason that we're human beings at all is because we've accepted good and evil, and we exult over the good, and we fear or hate the evil, and that constitutes humanhood. When you no longer exult over the good and no longer fear the evil, you're no longer human. You are the child of God that was created in the image and likeness of God in the beginning. You can gather that from God's words to Adam at a certain period of his development, when Adam hid himself. And God wanted to know why. I'm naked. Who said that thou art naked? Who told thee that thou art naked? Good and evil has come into the mind, huh? One part of the body is all right and the other part isn't. The other part isn't. Why? Who said so? Who said that thou wast naked? Why, nothing except the belief in good and evil. That's all. If it wasn't for that belief in good and evil, who would care whether they had clothes on or clothes off if the weather were right? But no. We have accepted the belief of good and evil, and with it, we've accepted sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation. And we're never going to be able to overcome our humanhood until we have overcome the belief in good and evil and are able to face any situation in life without a belief that it can be either good or evil, since all the issues are not in things but in the withinness. Well, in the same way, in this book, you're going to read about the Sermon on the Mount in a way that you've never in your life read about it. It doesn't appear anywhere in any of the literature that we know of, because it came to me through revelation, what the Master was saying in the Sermon on the Mount. And incidentally, it came to me in a shocking manner, too. It came to me on a Wednesday night in the Chicago class when I was talking about something or other, and all of a sudden stopped. And then all of a sudden the whole secret of the Sermon on the Mount poured itself out. I'd never heard it before, never known it before, never thought of it before, never had spoken about the Sermon on the Mount in any of my work. And then all of a sudden, out it popped. And I was receiving it at the same time that the students were. But since then, as I've had time for this revelation to work in me, I have clearly seen what the Master was driving at in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, "Ye have heard it said of old." And then he told you what the old Hebrew life was like. But then he said, "I say unto you." And now he begins to give you the Christ truth that we've been speaking of here this evening. The Christ truth, in which you don't have to fear anything that's external to you, whether it's a calendar or a person or a bomb. Resist not evil, I say unto you. You have heard it said of old that you should fear, but I say unto you, fear not, resist not evil. There isn't anything in this world that can do harm to you. Well, we haven't attained that, but that's what we have to attain in order to be able to live the Christian life. The Hebraic life is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and get there first with the biggest bomb. But that's not the Christian way. The Christian way is resist not evil. There's nothing in this world that can harm you. All you have to do is live in my word and let my word live in you. And you're completely free of any harmful effects from anything, from any person, from any condition on the face of the earth. You'll be shocked. Shocked when you learn more about that Sermon on the Mount. But so it is. It's all based on one thing. My entire life, from the very minute that I had my first spiritual realization, has been based on the term the Christ. even when I had no idea at all of what it meant or how it functioned or what the Bible said about it. That has been the little gentle term inside of me that has motivated and governed my life, the Christ. And I've known that in proportion as I did nothing, the Christ could do all things through me. And it has done wonders, as you've seen with this infinite way, and it's going around the world. It does wonders. It does. Separate and apart from it, I wouldn't want to face life. I'd rather have it end very, very quickly than ever have to think of living my life separate and apart from that little thing that I keep feeling inside there, that I realize is the Word of God, the Spirit of God. I can do all things through Christ. I live, yet not I. This Christ lives my life. But the manner of attaining it is the listening ear. It is those periods of meditation which you have got to take. It's the command of the clock that you've got to have. Then when you have command of the clock one of these days, you'll have dominion over the calendar. You'll not have to fear the passage of time. And I think that is where we will leave ourselves tonight. Steal silently and gently away